Welcome to another Data Hurdles. I'm Chris Detzel.
I'm Michael Burke. How you doing, Chris?
Pretty good, man. Dallas is hot as hell.
Have you slowed down on the morning runs now? Has that been your focal
It's
point?
yeah,
Is
it's
it
new because
4 a.m.? How early is it getting now?
we do. My wife and I get up and go run with this group on Tuesdays around at the track with this other group around 5:20. So we'll jog over to the track, which is about 2 miles, run a few more miles. We'll do some speed work and then jog back home, and it's a killer. So yeah, we're getting up early.
No, that's
So
great.
how about you? You had a chicken coop. You're finished.
It's done. So I've been working on this chicken coop now for, I don't know, a month, like on and off in my nights and weekends, and we finally finished it. It's beautiful. It's 20 feet long. We have six chickens.
Wow.
Um, yeah, we're
Great.
gonna get 1,800 eggs a year now. It's wild. We're going full homesteading out here in Carlisle.
Hey, we have a special guest, Michael. What do you think?
Chris, nice to meet you. Yeah, this is Chris Bergh, CEO of DataKitchen and head chef. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. And I'm really proud to be talking to some runners and some chicken people.
I was looking at the name of your company. It's Data Kitchen. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about yourself. But I'm also interested in the head chef piece. Like it goes perfect with Data Kitchen. So
Don't be boring, right? Go to a conference
no.
and there's like a bunch of middle-aged white guys. And as a middle-aged white guy, I sort of wanted to know. And when we started the company a decade ago, we had a spreadsheet of names. And of course, our wives had in, and we had some really bad names like Data Cavalry and typical sounding one,
Yeah.
and Data Friday. And they all had these intonations that were bad. And so we settled on Data Kitchen, I think, for a couple of reasons. One is that there's an emphasis on a team in a kitchen, right? It's not your personal kitchen. We mean a good restaurant, right? And go to a good restaurant. What are they trying to do? They're not counting ingredients. They're trying to make great food and make
Yeah.
it really consistent over and over again. And also, if it's a good restaurant, they're trying to invent and create new dishes. And that tension between consistency and quality and delivery and the creation and newness. And of course, since the restaurant and a lot of restaurants fail, productivity and being able to make money, it really fits the challenges that data and analytic teams have because they get crappy ingredients. They have demanding customers who demand them to be perfect, always asking for, they're always asking for something different. It's not like you can't make a steak. I want my steak, but I don't want salt and I only want pepper on one half. And you've got to get the best out of your people and you can't
Yeah.
just keep people to solve problems. So the metaphor
I
sort
love
of
it. Sorry, I was
um,
just gonna say I love it. I see like in the back of my head, and pardon for the distraction, Scott Taylor like creating some sort of meme in the background, the data whisperer.
yeah, yeah,
But it's so true, right? Every kitchen struggles with just operations, right? And every
yeah.
day is a new day, right? In the kitchen, you have bad actors, you've got challenging customers, you've got inventory you need to manage. And I think that having worked in those same spaces, it's so true. Like you run into a problem or a challenge that you have to overcome every week that's new and
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. And you know what? Like people really matter. Your processes really matter. And you know what? Getting a better oven kind of matters, but it's not the big deal. 500 degrees is 500 degrees, right? And it's about the system and as much, even more so than the tools. And of course, it's about the raw ingredient, right? You can't do anything, but it's about the system of work, the people in the processes. And I arrived at it. I did do a lot of jobs when I was younger, some of which were restaurants. So I can't say I'm head chef because I'm a really good cook. I grill pretty good. My wife's a good chef. But I came to this idea from a very different perspective. So I spent a bunch of my career in software and I started off a long time ago doing AI for air traffic control, automation.
Very nice.
And about 2005, I'd done a bunch of software, had managed software teams. I'm a technical guy, so I've written a ton of code. And then I got the idea that this data and analytics thing was cool. And my kids
Yeah.
were small, and I thought, I'm a big software guy. This data stuff, it's for lesser beings. And I took over this role managing a team that delivered insight to a healthcare company. And so I had data engineers and scientists and people
Yep.
doing charts and graphs all working for me. And my life dog kid was hell. I was on the time getting BlackBerry calls at the soccer field. Hey, Chris, things are wrong. Can you come fix it? We couldn't go fast enough. I was blaming my employees. It just was a mess, and it was very stressful and unhappy. And unfortunately, I think that situation, or fortunately for me, I worked through from why is that? Why was I so unhappy, and why were things breaking left and right? And why couldn't I go fast enough for my team? And why couldn't I go fast enough for my customers? And I started to look at what the first principles behind that. And I started to have this metaphor of, in production, data and analytics is a lot like a factory, right? You're taking things inside and you're putting it in a database, you're transforming it. Maybe the data is mastered originally, maybe that's ancillary, maybe you're putting models on it, visualizations, you're exporting. It's a step-by-step process. So how do you get quality out of a step-by-step process? Some pretty smart people already thought of that, right? The Deming, the Toyota industrial process control. So thinking of the work that you do like a factory and managing and focusing on the process of work, the system, and the metrics on that system is important. And then the second sort of salient thing is it's not a factory. It's also software, right? And people want perfection in analytics, but they also have an unending, unyielding demand for new insight, right? That just happens. And they have no idea how hard it is, and they don't care. You're both, sorry, you're running a factory and you're a magician at the same time. And so how do you get new insight into their hands? And then how do you affect change on that production line? And so there's these two opposite things, run high quality, but change quickly. And that really was my life, trying to work through those things. And then that company, we actually sold it to another company, and Reltio I saw was on Redwood Shores. The company we sold it to, Model N, was on Redwood Shores.
Oh, that's too funny.
And when we started this company, we were like, okay, what are we going to do? And we started to realize that the problems that we had, I need to run a factory for analytics. I need to change things fast. I've got demanding customers. I don't have infinite resources, generalized across every data and analytic team. And we didn't have a word for it. So we had to choose words. We called it agile analytic operation. We tried to call it agilitic ops for a while. That really didn't work. If you think of it, it shortens to anal ops, which is a good thing. We, about 7-8 years ago, we wrote a manifesto, and we've written a lot of books and produced a lot of content about how do you bring ideas that are basically stolen from agile and DevOps and lean manufacturing into the world of teams whose job it is to deliver insight to their demanding customers. And so that's the North Star that we've been going after, trying to make that happen in the world. And we've been a more profitable company. We've never had any outside investment, and we're still on that path. And open sourcing is part of that journey. And that's really our perspective on data and analytic teams. And does that make sense? I can go more.
No, I love it. I think it's great. One thing is, as somebody as you're walking through these pains, I've lived through a lot of them, experienced many, as anyone who's worked in the data space, right? There are so many frameworks and systems and platforms out there, right? There's a myriad array of things that do relatively the same thing, or a lot of similar things, right? How does your company, in my opinion, really, it's more about enabling and getting people to use these frameworks more than anything else, right? At the end of the day, everything that we produce, even the data, is a tool that only can be consumed if there's a willingness to consume. How do you differentiate a successful customer from an unsuccessful customer as you're working through these implementations? Because I'm sure they're pretty big and I'm sure they take time, right?
Yeah. Think of it this way. I don't want to replace any tool that they're using, right? There's tons of ETL tools, tons of data science tools, Viz tools, governance tools, MDM tools, reverse ETL tools. That's fantastic. People love their tools, right? I'm more of a sort of a Python SQL guy. So I like those stacks, and I'm familiar with Tableau. That's why, because I just know it, but you may know. I mean, like informatica, you may want it else. And so I'm not a flowers things. How do you tell if they're successful? I think of it this way. You've got two 23-year-old problems and a 46-year-old problem.
Yeah.
So let's start with a 23-year-old. I run a data and analytics team. You said that people who are listening to your podcast are more mental managers. They hire people. You hire this 23-year-old. He or she's bright. Done a lot of work. They come in, they're like, and that data is awesome, blah, blah, blah. They read all the stuff. I think the number one thing you should be able, or number one and two things you should be able to do with those 23-year-olds are take them and allow them to make a change to something. Add a new data set, change a schema, tweak a model, tweak a report, and know that whatever they've done will work without anyone else looking at it. Press a button. I've made the change. I might get to blow some stuff up, right, from their desktop. And when you hire them, benchmark your team. Can they make that change in their first week in the job? Something's a bug fix. And so what does that mean? And so I have a son who joined Amazon as a software developer. He works in the business to business transaction stuff. Love my son. Great kid. I wouldn't trust him to make a code change. Not because he's not hurt, but you should have seen his room when he was a kid. He was a teenager. It was scary. Why did they trust my son? The fact that they did not. They had a system next to my son to say, he made this tiny change in this big complicated thing. Boom, you broke something. Boom, you didn't. So that 23-year-old problem, can that 23-year-old change something? Another 23-year-old problem is a customer goes, this doesn't look right. Can that person find where the cause was quickly? And then the 46-year-old problem is, I'm running a team of data scientists, data engineers. Can I measure my team? Can I measure their productivity? Can I measure their cycle time? Can I measure our customers and how well they are appreciating or not appreciating? There's a huge measurement gap in management, and it's very hard to measure the result, the business effect of an insight in data, because is it the insight or is it the resulting action from the insight? And that's a philosophical discussion that, frankly, I've had before and I don't really want to have again. However, you can measure how much work your team's doing.
Yeah.
You can measure how much things have changed, how much new things you tried. You can measure your customer stat. And so I think if teams focused on those three things, teams that do that are literally 10 times more productive than teams aren't. And I'm not the only one who's seen that. It's Gartner and others. And that comes to why it matters, because teams that aren't productive are unhappy teams, are teams that get their budget cut. And I think we did a survey with Data.World 2 years ago, 700 data engineers. They got the funding. We poured some money in it. So it's a real survey. 78% were so frustrated in their job, they wanted it to come with a therapist. And something like 80% were thinking of leaving the career altogether.
Yep.
That's not acceptable to me, it's not about the tool. It's about the system. And so to me, that's the mission that however crazy the stupid is, the mission to bring those ideas forward. And that's, I think, partly ideas. So we've written some books and manifestos, and it's partly can be enabled through software.
I love it. When you think about data and these teams that are responsible for delivering some sign of quantifiable value, whether it's a report or a product, how do you differentiate, or what differentiates a team that's enabled to do those things versus one that's more victimized or a subsequent afterthought, I think, in the planning and budgeting process? I see, at least in my experiences, I've seen both, and it completely changes the dynamics of things like cycle time. Like, I feel like there's always these underlying drivers that are additive to that, which is how much responsibility and influence does a team have in the overall company vision, right?
Yeah. I think I would benchmark if teams are making changes quickly in response to customer requests. The rate at which they're creating nuggets of insight and throwing them up against the wall and seeing it work. I happen to be of the opinion that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'd rather get feedback from my customer first. So get something done quickly, throw it up on the wall, see if it works, and then iterate and fix, rather than spending 3 months building something only to find out you got it just 50% of what you wanted, right? And that's full time saves you so much waste. And so the the secret here is that there's just an enormous amount of waste in the system. And the waste comes from, I had an error in data that showed up all the way into a report that went to the CEO. Everyone's in panic. Everyone's working to find out where it is, fix it. That's all lost, right? Another is I made a small change somewhere in development. It broke something. Again, it's broken production. And so these sources of waste, or I've spent 3 months building something only to find out it wasn't the right thing. In some ways, 70 to 80% of the work that teams do is waste. And the biggest thing that you attack, if you attack the waste, you don't attack that 30%. So I don't really give a crap whether you use a GUI tool, whether you write code, whether some magic LLM writes your queries for you. That's where the problem is. You can get margins on that, but who cares? It's really the big Megillah problem, waste. And that's what we need to focus on.
And it's so interesting to me. You brought up something that I just love. And it's one of the first things that I've done when leading data teams in the past is put them in front of the customers. Like so many times I've seen data teams that sit in the back, they release something and they have no feedback loop to understand what's happened, when it went wrong, how big of a problem was it. The only communication they get is from their direct manager or maybe one above. And I think when you take data stores and ICEs and you put them in front of a customer call where there was a problem that they're responsible for, it gives you an accountability and an ownership to your work that in many companies is just never seen, especially when you get into more complicated ecosystems where you could just be a smaller cog in a bigger system. There's no customer communication.
Happier and more fulfilled when you have someone you talk to and they thank you, right? Because a lot of data teams are shamed and blamed. They're treated as plumbers. And so they've built this wall around of, think of it as kind of fear, and they're like craft manufacturing and fear-laden proceduralism. How about that? So they want to have the processes to produce things and step by step and documentation. They're very rude to the customer. They're very fearful of what the customer is going to say, right? That's one edge of the barbell. On the other edge of the barbell, you have the heroic group who are working nights and weekends. They are in front of the customer. They're doing amazing work.
Yep.
And they're creating huge amounts of technical debt along the way. Like I don't know if you've seen the graph of the number of DBT models that like it goes up.
Yeah.
That's not thing that happened when you had the number of ETL jobs, or you had Cognos and the number of embedded SQL in every Cognos report. Complexity built. And both those things are heroic. There's nothing wrong with heroic, right? There's really nothing wrong with fear. You need to have the balance between the two. Right?
One thing that I've learned is, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but so in working at a cybersecurity company previously and now a data company and dealing with engineers, PMs, SCs, just a lot. And so I've run online communities and programs around these online communities for a long time now. And one of the things that I've seen from a developer standpoint is that these guys aren't really recognized for the work that they do. That's one. And two, I feel at some of these companies I've been at is we appreciate them. We probably pay them extremely well, but the people that are being recognized are marketing people and all these other things that are outside in front of the customer. What I've tried to do is build programs that allow either our developers or the people building the product, TMs, et cetera, to get in front of multiple customers all at one time. So we'll go deep and we'll do a live webinar, do these every week, and we'll get them in front of our customers and partners. And these people are asking, I'll get 20, 30 questions per show or per webinar. And I think that we've had some developers as well. And the things that they say, geez, I wish I could do more of these because I'm learning a ton, because they're getting tons and tons of questions and being like, we built this thing that just nobody adopted for the last 2 years. And so we're changing it. And so there's a lot of debt in those things, but we have to build programs for these developers and PMs and folks to get out in front of those customers. Yes, there's one-off calls that you're getting, but how do you get the entire community engaged and involved in just building those programs to allow those developers and or people building the product, whether the PMs, whatever, to do that.
Yeah. From our own software, we assign engineers to customers, and everyone get to know one or two customer in your head in detail. And some like it, some love it. Some are like, oh, it's annoying because they're and it's also, it comes down to leadership. Like what is done and what is success? And those are very fundamental questions. And for a lot of data teams, done is the data is in the L2 level in the database, or my model works on my box. That's done. And so no, done is actually in production. Done is in production, in use, and you've gotten feedback on it. That's done. And so that's a leadership question about how you say what's done and what's valuable. And so, and also what you praise matters as a leader. So I've had to learn to not praise heroism. Some work, like I praise heroism in public and I punish it in private. Because look, you work off, and as a punish, I discuss.
Yes, right.
And like, look, that's great. Your customer asked you to do this. You worked all Friday evening on it. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Like you're awesome. How do we get here? Like, how do we get to the fact that you had to do that? Is this a one-off and you just had to do it because they had a deadline? Fantastic. Are they asking you every Friday?
Yeah.
Why is that? Are you forgetting that you need to put some automation, a little bit of data quality testing around it, so you're not actually fixing bugs afterwards? Can you fix it further up the cycle? And those sort of questions of how do you gain your productivity back and stop being, and then in the other case where people are like saying, no, we've got to have our SLDC is this step-by-step process. And who knows if they're even useful? Let's just get something out there quickly and then iterate on it and automate it and test it. And I guess I'm a bit frustrated at the slowness of this has happened because of my own experience. And I think I'd love to get your feedback on, I've been talking in the face of this stuff 7-8 years, and it seems obvious to me, but like these sort of ideas aren't standard operating procedure in a lot of organizations. And the bigger companies end up with fear-laden proceduralism. While companies end up in over-heroic, that'll be medium, and the investing and the kind of things that a software or a manufacturing team would like. You don't manufacture a car now without thinking about the 2 out of production, right?
Yeah.
Not out of quality. No one does that anymore. The same thing with software. Anybody, like in 96, I worked on one of the first community websites. I changed code in production constantly. Like, and late at night, I kicked 500,000 people out of their chat rooms and restarted the server, all constant. It's like, that was seen as cool. Now, no one would do that, right? You would have dev environments, QA environments, you have AD, you have regression tests, you'd have observability and monitoring. Like that would be, you wouldn't even think of working for a company like that. And so the puzzle that I have is like, why is it so slow? I don't know, maybe you guys can help me. I just can't. Like, why is this not moving faster? And why do people nod their head and go, yeah, that really sucks? But
I've given this a little bit of thought. I think it's our inherent nature to reduce liability as individuals in our roles. And so this
sometimes you get in trouble for it. Like,
right,
you start doing something and
punished,
then you're like, hey, why did you do this? You're supposed to do this. And I'm like, okay, God.
I have this slope, right? Like I'm in the startup world right now, and it is all about heroism, getting everything out, 24-hour release cycle type of deal on everything. You, as somebody who's experienced large enterprises and managed teams in large enterprises, you see the shortcomings way further out and where that's going to cause problems. You're going to have customer outages. And as you get into these roles that are more ingrained in a specific function in a larger organization, you become detached from the customer. You become detached from the end value that you're disrupting by creating this procedure. And the gains far outweigh any kind of loss that you're going to that's going to impact you. And I think that's where it comes from, is it's just too big for you to see that awareness. And as you get bigger, trimming that fat out and creating innovation teams and, these places that can skyrocket and build quickly is some of the crutches that I think we build because we haven't addressed these internal things and started to really reassess what does success mean? How much impact will adding an additional layer of procedure create in our ecosystem? Nobody penalizes you for creating procedure, right?
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. And I've had data teams say, we've been successful. We followed our process.
Yeah.
Okay. But using Does it matter? Have you had an effect?
Yeah.
We got an award because we followed our process very clearly.
Yeah.
And, it took us 4 months and $1 million to do something that would have taken a normal person a week.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's getting even harder right now too, because if you think about it, if you start to add in these not new, but newly implemented databases that are coming on board, like machine learning and graph databases and encodings and embeddings, you're abstracting these problems further and further away from customer value. And so it becomes a system where the data engineer and the DevOps team may not even have insights into what the data scientist and the AI engineer are creating anymore. And there's this breakdown of not only communication, probably, but skill sets and the ability to understand. And so then it becomes a protective measure to create process. And I've seen this happens like time and time again. And you have to have that person who can span multiple areas of work and kind of bridge that, optimize it, take out that 10% of fat that gets in there every year to clean the systems, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the role-based balkanization. It's the data ingest team. It's the analytic engineering team. It's the data science team. It's the visualization team. It's the business analyst. And suddenly you've got, and there's subcomponents in each, right? And teams specialize, and you have a whole team of functional oriented people, and they get slow. And so it's that. And I also think it's hard for teams because they are operating they are trying, right? And they're delivering, and customers are very demanding. But that's really good. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah. But for us, we believe this. So we started off kind of building sort of the product that did everything. So our first product was, let's start with deployment and make deployment, we started with a 23-year-old who makes a small change, and we want to see the impact. So we built a full automation to do that. You could plug in different tools, you could do testing, you could deploy it all at once. And then we started off with saying, okay, how do you do change? You go to CDOs. And we wrote books on data ops transformation, because I went to the DevOps Enterprise Summit like 6 years ago, and there were all these teams talking about, from big companies, saying, yeah, we've got a DevOps dojo and we've got a DevOps team and we're doing Agile and it's great. And we're making this big transformation of our IT organization to follow Agile and DevOps principles. And I was like, okay, that'll happen in data. People will get there. They're going to get there. And both of which kind of, they work somewhat, but they didn't work super well, mainly because CDOs have a 2-year time point. They come in and they're like, wow, you didn't fix everything, and AI isn't going to be, and same thing's happening again, right? Some CDOs saying Gen AI is going to change our world, and guess what? It's not. It'll do some stuff, but it's not going to change your world. And they're going to be out in 2.5 years. And that's not the way and so this sort of top down change. And so I guess what we're focusing on now, one of the reasons why as a private company, we spent $6 million developing our software. Don't tell my wife. And when we've open sourced all of it, or we have an enterprise version that has some group features, but all the core features for an individual. And so we're hoping that individuals, and one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is you got to start, and don't start with the deployment problem. Start with I got stuff in production and it's not, customers are yelling at. So start there. Start with observing what's in production and start observing the tools or observing the data or both to make sure that you lower your error rate in production. So solving the other 23-year-old problem and solve that first, and then solve it from an individual just giving it a try, as opposed to the manager making a change. And because a lot of these things are pretty interconnected, once you start to have checks either before or during or production on data or tools, like, is the data the right size? Is it the right shape? Is it the right distribution? Has the 12-month sales between the last time I gave this report to someone and the current report, have they shifted a bunch? Like, very simple sort of metrics to look at data. If you get those things and start, that actually enables a lot of benefits. And so people have these unobserved and unchecked systems where they build with hope the data work. I built it. It didn't work. Again, got an update. It worked. Everything ran. And why customer yelling at me? And so we built sort of an engine that has that automatically creates these data quality validations for you by learning your data. And we're hoping that could be the linchpin to help people. Because another learning on my part is as a software engineer, I came from the background of you write your damn tests. If you can't write tests, you're not a good software engineer. So while you're doing data, why can't you write tests? I think data engineers don't have the business context and they don't have time. And so having a tool that can scan the data and give them 50 or 80% of the tests that they need, and there's 20% that they have to write because they're like super context specific, can be an unlock for them. And that's our hope and why we're open sourcing and why I'm talking about it, because it's Apache 2, it's all ready to go. We got a nice UI on it. And then the other part too is the set of different software, right? When you make a test in the software development cycle, you don't need to tweak it, right? It's like maybe once in a while, there's no business context to it. And so a lot of tests are parameter driven. Should the sales go up 3% or 5%? I'm comparing last month's sales to this month's sales. Should they be exact? Should they decline? That's a business context judgment. And so you need a data steward or a business analyst to help you. We have a nice user interface to turn the knobs on it and fine tune these things, because the business context, an awful lot to ask to have a data engineer also be very familiar with what's happening in their corporate report and what product they're pushing. And a lot of people in business, they've got a couple hundred metrics about their business they've memorized in their head, right? And they're looking at those. And if you ever put a report up in someone who spent their whole college going to parties while you were pounding calculus books and they go, well, that's wrong. You know why? Because they've memorized all this thing. And so you've got to back and look at it from their eyes. So we think the unlock here is automatically generated data quality validation tests. And then the other unlock is being able to visualize the entire production process, make a digital twin of the assembly line, and put information on that. And we call it a data journey. And both those things they don't really exist in the market now. And those are the two innovations that we think will make it worthwhile for people to try some new software.
I love that idea of a data journey. I just think that is so cool. I've read of a few of these kind of trending things, data meshes and other principles and terminology of tracking metadata, but it seems like it is an incredibly challenging thing not to track the data, but to understand the context of where it's headed and what it's being used for, especially in these bigger enterprise systems. I just remember running a data team years ago. We would produce data for specific intentions, but 6 months later, those use cases and the catalogs would get all out of sync and people would be using them in the marketing department. And somehow it's like, how did you get that data? And it was this whole like command and control view. And it seems like for a lot of companies, they've switched to more of a siloed view now where different departments own these data catalogs, which is great. But then you start to get silos, right? And these silos become bigger and they start doing repetitive tasks and creating different definitions of the same thing. With a data journey, I would just love to hear your perspective on how that is managed. Is it the data steward's responsibility? Is it the end user's responsibility? Who keeps tabs on things as it grows?
I think there's two different senses of the term. Like one is a blueprint of what's going on. This table and this column has this table goes to here. That's data lineage. And I think that's great. Blueprints are great, right? I think of the data journey not as a blueprint, but as a fire alarm control panel, right? It points out where the problem is. It doesn't describe where all the furniture is. It doesn't say have the size and shape of the room, but it says this is going on in this room. And so I think it's that shared context doesn't exist because the process, your assembly line is often broken up into pieces. You have an ingest team putting it in a data lake. You have varieties of analytics engineers. You have data scientists doing extracts. You have BI people. And so the production process, nobody knows who's using what's data. And so that's the kind of context I want people to have, because that's the break fix. How do you find problems before customers do? It doesn't give you the exact dimensions of the room, but if your house is on fire, you don't really care about the exact dimensions of the room. You just want to know what room it is to bring the fire up. And so that to me, a simpler problem and one that people should accomplish first. And it also has to do, it's a live problem. as opposed to a descriptive. It's what entities. And so let's say that room is your predictive model that happens to be running in a container. Did the container stop? Did Docker Hub fail that you couldn't pull it? Did you load the data in the container and it was too big? Did everything run fine, but like somehow the model's off, not predicting, right? Like, where is it? And those things are really interesting things to know about and to collect and centralize the information instead of having the CEO found the report wrong. So now you've got 10 of your best people all running commands and in our log files trying to find out where the problems are. Centralize the information into this fire alarm control panel. So you can have that 23-year-old say, okay, looks like Docker Hub's down. That's why we don't have the container. Maybe we should get off Docker Hub. Happening for some of our cases now. Docker Hub isn't being reliable. Yes, that's the sense that we think it's valuable. Not to say there's not everything valuable, but I just think reducing errors for a team frees up time, it frees up waste, and it frees up the mental energy to make more changes. And the more changes you make, the more likely you're able to hit on what really matters for a customer.
I love it. So 3 to 5 years out, generative AI and large language models take over the world. Kidding. I have my doubts there. But where do you see observability heading? There are going to be a lot more complicated systems and problems in kind of these fire alarm panels as they get more complex, as we use more embedded models. Even in our data abstraction and featureization, right? There's going to be more complexities in how we get to those points. Where do you see observability moving to?
I think as people build more complicated systems and as the algorithmic component comes in, that it makes it, you need to check actively if things are working the way you expect. And so that means that you need to connect, and that's a fundamentally an across and down problem. So you need to look across the tools, right? And then go down. The server now is a process that's running on that server. Now the data that's active, the data going in or the data coming out. So I think it's invariant of whether it's an algorithmic or non-algorithmic system. I think we have multi-tool chains that are loosely coordinated that we need to monitor in an across and down pattern and find problems quickly and resolve them. And I think that's what I hope people will do, because if you don't, then it's very hard to find out when you have errors in production. And then customer confidence, and every time you have an error, it's harder to fix. And then again, if you actually have that level of visibility across your production system, you can use that same visibility in development. And you can say, look, in production, the code's fixed, but the data's varied. In development, the data's fixed, but the code varies. And your tests can be used in either case, and your data journey can be used in either case to help you regression test or impact analysis. So that's where I'm hoping that we go. I don't know. I wonder what the impediments are. There's still a lot of people who believe in the magic AI bundle. I actually like LLM. It's enabled me to do a lot of marketing. I'm pretty good at, I don't really write very well. Like I can prompt, I'm a good prompt programmer. Like I write a prompt and program it. And my latest thing is to use 2 LLMs together. I use Claude and GPT-4o together to write. It works well. And then Grammarly to do it. I find it useful. I started my career with Pages and programming and Nerd. There used to be, and 10, 15 years ago, it was Google searches and Stack Overflow. Those are really good. And now people are going to use prompts. But yeah, that's good. All those are marginal increases in efficiency and allow another group of people to enter into the field, which is all good. But it's when 70% of your problem isn't the 30% of the work you do in your tool, the system is the waste around. Let's focus on the waste. Don't say, I can take someone's time and go from 30% and I can squeeze it by, I can make a 5 or 10% improvement in their time. But still, the big area is errors and cycle time and the waste that we're creating. And if we focus on those system things, we're just going to have a lot more teams, and we're stop kind of producing analytics like 1970s AMC Pacer, right?
This was excellent. Chris, thank you so much for your time. That's all. I don't know if you have any other questions you wanted to wrap up with.
No, that's it. This has been really great. And Chris, really awesome to have you on and share your experience and thought leadership. It's really great.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and go to GitHub, Data Kitchen, check it out, give it a star. It's really, we put a lot of work into trying it out. You should be able to put it on your laptop and play around with it. There's some demo there. We also have a certification series going on. So if you want to get certified, and to the extent that a PDF from Data Kitchen matters to you, we will send you a thing that you were certified. Well, we've had hundreds of people do it, and our data ops certification, we had almost 3,000 people do it so far. So
That's awesome.
Wow. It's amazing.
It's a good way to share ideas. And so I think PDF, but it's 3 hours of your time and you get to hear more of my charming voice.
I'm sure it's great. And that's the developer landscape. They love that kind of stuff, certifications, and they want to learn and they want to get better and smarter. And I think that's great.
You've got to gift ideas. And so that's a big thing. I think that's what's real. And I think that's what's good about open source. You gift code. And that's how we get better.
Sure.
And software companies are virus. If we can spread ideas, and vessel one spread faster. And I think that's our role, is to spread this virus. And a lot of, just to conclude, it's not, DataKitchen's not the only one who's spreading these ideas. There's a lot of other companies who are to push the same ball uphill. Glad to be part of this.
Love what you guys are doing. And thank you everyone for tuning in to another Data Hurdles. And thank you, Chris. He's the Data Kitchen CEO and head chef. And Michael Bergh, thank you so much for coming on. I'm Chris Detzel, and
I'm Michael Bergh. And don't forget to rate and review us. Thank you.
Yes, please do. Thank you.